Every interaction in your life is sacred, and character is who you are to people who you do not think can help you.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch in New York City. Oh, come all ye faithful and faithless is the slogan for the Ye Gods podcast, which engages comics, musicians, writers, and thinkers in conversations of biblical proportions. Scott Carter is the creator and host of the show, and he'll be my guest this week on The State of Belief.
Greetings from my bath, festive friends. The holidays are overwhelming, but I'm tackling this season with PayPal and making the most of my money. Getting 5% cash back when I pay in full. No fees, no interest. I used it to get this portable spa with jets. Now the bubbles can cling to my sculpted but pruny body. Make the most of your money this holiday with PayPal. Save the offer in the app.
Ends 12/31. See paypal.com/promo terms. Points can be redeemed for cash and more. Pay in four subject to terms and approval. PayPal Inc. and MLS 910457.
We need voices like Scott's to be heard now more than ever. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Taking a minute to do those things really helps other people discover our show and become listeners too. Our library of past conversations includes over 150 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Bishop William Barber, writer and commentator Wajahat Ali, Indivisible founder Leah Greenberg, Father Jim Martin, and many, many others. You can help grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. And now to my guest. Scott Carter is the creator, executive producer, and host of the Ye Gods with Scott Carter podcast, where he invites comedians, writers, thinkers, and artists to talk about belief, doubt, and the moral codes that guide them. Scott has 21 Emmy nominations and many, many industry awards for his work in television, where he served as producer and writer for shows like Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher and Real Time with Bill Maher. He's been a stand-up comedian. He's also a playwright whose works cover culture, spirituality, and storytelling. They've been produced in cities all across the U.S. and abroad. The Ye Gods podcast gets into the spiritual beliefs and guiding principles of a variety of guests, going in depth with notable individuals from various fields with no judgment and no agenda. Whoa, that sounds refreshing. Ye Gods is created with Southwest Florida's WGCU Public Media and is distributed by the NPR network. Boy, am I glad to welcome Scott Carter to The State of Belief.
Paul, I am so glad to be here today. And, I'm looking for a publicist. And I think if you could assure that every intro was as complimentary as this one was, I think you have a job ahead of you.
I feel like I need to move to LA because the last person who said that to me was Rob Reiner after I introduced him about his great documentary about Christian nationalism. He was like, maybe you should be our publicist. I was like, Rob, I am so available for that. It hasn't come through. I'm still president of Interfaith Alliance, but maybe there's a future for me somewhere. Listen, I'm so excited about Ye Gods. Congratulations. This is such an important show. I mean, tell us about it.
Thank you so much.
Tell us, first of all, why you wanted to do this kind of show. Given your incredible track record, you could do so many things. You chose Ye Gods, which really goes into moral codes, beliefs, disbeliefs, all of that. I'm excited by this. Tell us why you decided to do it.
Well, this all starts back many, many decades ago in New York. I'm a lifelong asthmatic. I've been asthmatic since the age of 2, and I lived in fact, I was born in Kansas City. My family moved to Arizona when I was 8 because in those days they thought that asthmatics had a better chance of surviving in the desert, in the dry desert pizza oven air. And that may have been true at some point, but there has been so much pollution in a lot of these formerly healthy sites that I don't think it's a cure for anyone anymore. I hope I don't get in trouble with their Chamber of Commerce. But so I became I became a playwright with a group in Tucson, Arizona, at the offshoot from the University of Arizona Drama Department that I helped found over 50 years ago, and it is still operating today.
Wow. What is the name of it?
It's called The
Let's-
Invisible Theater.
Amazing.
And the first 3 or 4 years, we did only original plays. Then many of the writers left and it became an actors' theater. But it's still a place where I've gone back to every once in a while to do monologues or to have revivals of old plays or readings of new plays. And so I went to New York. I tried to be a playwright in New York, but when I got there this is the late 70s, uh, everybody wanted a one set, 2-character play on some social justice theme. And I only had these elaborate 10, 15, 20 people plays with 100 different locales because at the Invisible Theater, everybody wanted to be a part of our production in town. We were the hottest thing in town. And so we could write plays and have huge casts. So anyway, so my backup then eventually was to become a stand-up. And so in 1987, I was a stand-up, barely surviving. I was not a great stand-up. I was more intelligent than funny and more respected than I was amusing. Anyway, I had a near-death asthma attack in June of 1987. And I'd been like a lot of other comics, some of whom I've worked with for years, who are either despising of religion, they are some are belligerent atheists, and I was not quite in that group. But I thought that if there's a God, why do I wake up wheezing most nights? Why do I spend a lot of my time in emergency rooms? And so I had this near-death attack. I was at my new girlfriend's apartment on 54th Street. I woke up, could not breathe, took pills. They had no impact, took puffs of my inhaler, my rescue inhaler. It had no help. So eventually she called 911. Paramedics came. They got me on a stretcher to an ambulance. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we had to go through the Second Avenue Street Fair in
Oh, good
order to
Lord.
get to Bellevue. I got to the emergency room, and after a few minutes, one of the doctors came up behind me and whispered in my ear, "You're not going to die." And I remember thinking, okay, I will take your word for this. And luckily for me, the head of the chest lungs department, a doctor named Frank Adams, was on call that afternoon. And after I began to get treatments and I felt better and I was kind of back to normal, the place where normally I would then be going back to my apartment, heading home, he said, you've been like a trying to drive across country in second gear. You have been on a compromised foundation of health, and so I'm going to insist that you not go home now, that you stay in the hospital for the next week, and I want to raise you to a new base level of health, and then every 3 months I want you to come back and see me again, and I want to make sure that the attack you had is not repeated. And so I was at Bellevue for 6 days. I got out the following Saturday afternoon, and it was 1 o'clock. I walked out, steamy, hazy, New York summer day, and I had an epiphany experience like Paul on the road to Damascus, scales falling from eyes. And everything before in my life became BC, and from that moment on became AD. And I just remember, for instance, looking at a guy who was selling Sabrett hot dogs on the corner of 26th and 1st and thinking, what an incredible creator to have included this facet of culture into life. And I entered this bliss state that lasted 9 or 10 days. But after about a week, it began to fade. And I was like the character, the protagonist in the short story Flowers for Algernon, where I felt like I'd been experiencing temporarily a genius status, but slowly I was coming back to normal life. And I didn't want that to happen. I thought I've had the most profound week of my life for a sense of insight, a sense of connection with all the world, a sense of overwhelming gratitude. And I did not want to go back to a sleepwalking existence.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
thought,
Yeah.
number one, I'm acknowledging an undeniable for me, and it has not changed in all these years since 1987, sense of God. However, I did not have a specific religion to return to.
Uh-huh.
My
You were
parents
not raised in any particular
we
tradition
were we
or
were
nominally something.
we were Protestants,
Yeah.
but we were the sort of Protestants that whenever we would move to a new neighborhood, we would look for something within a 10-minute or 15-minute radius where the people were nice. And for my parents, the coffee and donuts served after the service were equal sacraments to wafer and wine
I
that were
think you
served
are.
at the ceremony.
I think that's actually one of the tenets of most Protestant churches. So
So
and,
so
and,
so
and
at
not the
different
worst
times,
thing.
yeah, we were Lutherans, we were
Yeah.
Methodists, we were
Okay. Yeah.
Presbyterians,
Yeah.
Episcopalians. So I had nothing to return to. So then I just made an agreement with the universe that for the next couple of years at least, if anybody wants to talk to me about religion, I can't be sarcastic. I can't walk
Mm.
away. I've got to
Oh wow.
stop and just listen. And if anybody wants me to read any material, any kind of literature, I will have to read it. And if anybody wants me to attend any kind of ceremony, I will have to go. And so I did this.
Wow,
So if I
that
was
is a
walking,
wild. I mean, I can't even. That is a very strong commitment, and I mean, I don't. There's something so beautiful about that. That open heart, that willing, like intentional curiosity, which is, I think, at the foundation of all spirituality, is like this intentional curiosity that says, "I'm open to where this might lead," and that is. But that's a discipline because we are busy people who often we're looking for a reason to like write someone off or something off, and I mean that's an incredible opening to I mean, and that's a long time ago. I mean,
yeah, it's a long time ago, but and I was just I spent last week at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, where there was a new play festival, and this new play that I've been writing was done there. And one of the questions in the playwrights panel was, "What do you want audiences to take away from this?" And so I gave a very brief encapsulation of what I just told you, but I ended by saying, I think everything I've done since 1987 has been with one goal in mind, which is to tell people to wake up.
mm, mm, yeah, that is. I mean, it's it's there's something that actually kind of transcends all, or it connects all religious traditions in that. Like it makes me think of like a Buddhist sense of like seeing through clearly, but also like it's become like somehow a negative word, but being woke in the Black Christian tradition was really being awake to what was happening around you and being like there was a spiritual element to it. So being awake, it just allows you. I mean, it allows you to interact with the world, and I think that is so exciting. And you have used art, which I actually think is one of the most profound ways to interact with spirituality and religion. For me, almost like a lot. I mean, before I went to seminary, I had a record company. I was like, I've always thought like a lot of the way I've understood, the way I've been communicated with about spirituality and songs that touched me, that like, whether it's David Bowie, like singing about somebody up there likes me, I mean, all these songs that, some people may not be listening with that sensibility like you are, but when you are listening to that and are awake to that, it's like the world becomes very exciting. I just another New York story. I remember when I was like in seminary and I was like really kind of thinking about like, what am I supposed to do? And all of a sudden I had one of those moments. I was in a subway car and I just looked around and I said, oh my God, look at all this beauty, which is not always the way we appreciate a subway car. But if you can see it in that moment, and every one of them is living these rich, vivid lives that I don't yet know about. But, if you can see the world in that way, it does change everything. And so it's really exciting. I mean,
Well, Paul, think about, you're sparking me toward many different associations, but the one that you just mentioned now about the subway car and beauty. Think about the movie American Beauty, written by Alan Ball, who's a friend of mine. And the notion in the middle of the film is about watching a paper bag be blown
oh my
around
God!
in
I remember
the air.
crying when I saw that.
Yeah.
I was in seminary when when that film came out, and that sequence, I was like, oh my God, that's it. If people don't know, set it up just so. I want to talk about everything else you've done, but this is so beautiful. This one scene in American
I'm probably going to
Beauty.
get it wrong, but there is a scene where someone describes to someone else in the movie.
Yeah.
And while that happens, there is a flashback, a silent flashback, and this person the character describes a moment in New York. It's in New York. It's in a city setting, but I think maybe it's suburban. But watching a gust of wind in an urban setting and watching a trash bag be kind of tossed around, and seeing this not as something trivial or insignificant, but
or
seeing
even
it,
even as trash,
or even as trash,
I
it
mean,
is more seen like something beautiful is occurring.
yeah.
And it's one of those images that, as you listen to the voiceover describing what this moment meant to the character and watching this little trash bag be tossed around, almost like Dorothy's house at the beginning of Wizard of Oz, as it moves up into the cyclone and is eventually going to go off into this fantasy kingdom. You can start projecting things into that we're all tossed around, that we're on a planet that is orbiting at every moment, though we think we're still and we're standing or sitting in one place. We're actually hurtling through the solar system at this moment, like the little trash bag.
Yeah, and that you can see beauty, even in
And that you can see
all
beauty
around
in
us,
it.
all around us.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Up next, much more with Scott Carter. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
This is a Bose moment. It's 10 blocks from the train to your apartment door. 10 basic, boring city blocks until the beat drops in Bose clarity. Streetlights become spotlights as you strut down the sidewalk, your own personal runway. With Bose, you get every note, every bass line, every detail, just as you should. Those 10 blocks, they could be the best part of your day. Your life deserves music. Your music deserves Bose. Find your perfect product at bose.com/Spotify.
I'm 32, juggling family, working full-time, and earning a bachelor's degree. At University of Phoenix, I earn career-relevant skills with every 5-week course. Skills I can use now, not just after graduation.
Earn skills in weeks, not years. Visit phoenix.edu.
Welcome back to the State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. My guest is Scott Carter, creator and host of the Ye Gods podcast. You have all of this, walking around awake and looking for it to be awake, and then you go work in television. And you worked again on many different shows, but famously on Bill Maher. There's I think like one of rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, but in some ways rightly, like there's like a snarkiness in some ways to that show. I mean, there's a curiosity, but I'm just wondering, like, how was it working in the, like, it's not a gentle field, television. I mean, it's a very intense sort of, like, first of all, competitive, but then also like you have to keep winning in a way or you get cut. And I just I'm curious how you maintained, we will get to you guys, but I am just like coming along, like having this epiphany and awakening, and then going into the beautiful field of television, which, I mean, I'm with you. There's so many talented people and so much beauty in television, and it's changed my life in so many ways. It's all of ours, but at the same time, the industry of it, I think, can be, my sense is it can be quite brutal. And you were on a show that kind of kept being very hard hitting. Tell me about how you kept this going as you were doing television.
Well, I first of all, let me say that I don't think I've always kept everything going. I have had periods where I've gotten absorbed by the daily pressures that you are accurately describing, and then have had to figure out ways like meditation, like
Sure.
attending ceremonies, like talking with, keeping contact with friends of mine who keep me grounded. Ways to keep. It's a little bit like when my bliss state in 1987 began to fade, and it's almost like I needed like a crowbar in a window to keep the window propped up. Because if I didn't have that crowbar propping the window open, the window would gradually shut.
For sure.
So when I got, one of the ways that I gave myself a way of keeping connected to the bliss state, was, well, for one of the things that you're told, and I learned this over a period of time, is don't try to keep it. That a lot of sacred teachings teach that it's almost like a season that visits you, but it's not going to be there forever. So, and the way to sort of, maybe ruin is too strong of a word, but the way to lose it quickest is to try to be holding on to it, and to not be honest about some of the less pleasant thoughts that are flowing through you, that you need to acknowledge and you need to deal with, because they're bringing up to you things in your character, things that you have harbored, or were indoctrinated from childhood or whatever. But they're things about your own character that you need to examine and resolve if you're going to get to a sustained foundation of peace. So one of the things I did was, when I got out of the hospital in June of 87, I had scheduled on September 2nd that year, there was a little club called Who's on First and 64th Street. And they had a tiny comedy club in the basement, maybe sat 40, 45 people. And I had scheduled, as many of the regular performers there did, an evening of doing character sketches. And when I got out of the hospital, after the bliss state began to fade, I said to myself, you know what? I've got about 6 weeks. I've got a little less than 2 months to do something. I'm going to write a new show. I'm going to do a full-length monologue that is going to describe this experience that I just went through. And this way, I will have the words forever for myself, and I will always be able to look back at them, and they will get me back to this time. So now, in in my earlier incarnation when I lived in LA for a couple of years before I returned to New York. And for a while during the Boogie Nights era, I had worked in a pornography factory, writing pornography. And while I was beginning to become a stand-up, and so what I wanted to do for my monologue was I wanted to, because I've always resisted when somebody came at me talking to me about God, I would immediately dismiss them. The word God was a turnoff. Any kind of affiliation with organized religion was off-putting to me. So I thought, if I'm going to do a show, I want to start going into the most sordid aspects of myself and lower myself in the audience's eye, also with a lot of humor. So what I did was I did the first act. It was a full-length evening with an intermission. The first act was about writing pornography. How did I come to be this guy doing this? And then the second half began with the asthma attack and then described what I went through for the first month or so, because things were still changing in me as I was writing out this monologue. So anyway, there's a very funny comedian who's been an actor on Mad Men and also Billions, named Alan Havey, who was a good friend of mine at the time. And I told him I'm preparing this monologue, and first act's going to be about pornography. Second act's going to be about a religious epiphany. He goes, use the title Heavy Breathing. So he gave me that title that united the first half with the second half. And the second night that I performed, I think I performed it 3 nights. And the first night that I performed it, 2 people came to show up. Alan was one, and another was a comedian named Steve Scrovan. And they came, and within a couple of months, both Steve and then later Alan were offered television shows as hosts, where they got to hire writers.
Oh,
And
wow.
and Steve hired me, and then Alan hired me. And then I became the producer of Alan's show, which was the beginning of what became Comedy Central. And that led me to Politically Incorrect. So, so to answer, this is a very long answer to your very adroit question uh, about how to deal in television. I've always thought that's what I'm adding. What I am adding to this project is a sense of compassion. My goal is on a team to be treating everyone with respect and love, to be treating every guest that comes on with love, to be treating the hosts, everybody I'm working with. That's my goal. I don't always achieve it, but that's my goal. And so in the case of Politically Incorrect, I was able to establish a rapport with conservatives who were booked, who thought that they were being booked to be mocked. And very often these people became friends of mine, that I would explain to them the ground rules, and then Bill did a really smart thing early on, which was he got a blue 5x8 card and he drew a line down the middle of it. And on the left side, he wrote every liberal idea that he believes in. But on the right side, he wrote down every conservative idea that he believes in. And during the commercial breaks, he would often share with a conservative guest, look, here are my beliefs. Here are my political or cultural beliefs. And the conservatives would be surprised
Uh-huh.
that he
Yeah.
sometimes saw things from their point of view.
Yeah. What I love, first of all, the thing about about like the epiphany fading, that's like as you say, that's a classic idea. Like that we have mountaintop experiences and then we are often in the valley, and figuring out like how to traverse the valley and not assume that every goal is to get to the mountaintop. You know, I mean, like some things happen on the mountaintop. Most of it happens in the valley. And I'm of a certain age when I'm talking to younger religious folks now, and I'm like, I've had moments of clarity less than I'm holding up 5 fingers. I don't live in that clarity moment. I live in the moment of trying to find, truth and trying to do the best I can. But I also want to say, like, part of what you're talking about is a discipline. And I think the reason people do go to church and reason that people go to mosque or go to meditation center or is actually to just say, okay, I'm going to commit this amount of time. Maybe nothing will happen, but let me give it a shot. And I do think that that's worth mentioning for people who just write off people who do attend services is like, they're trying to, I have 2 young kids now, and, we haven't been perfect about taking them, but when we take them, there's nothing else in their week that is like going to this Episcopal service that we have where people are saying things that they don't hear in other places. And it's just creating a space for something like to happen. The other thing I'll say about what your story and your show, that's like a classic witness test. That's like, you could do that in any church. And people were like, oh, that happened to you. You had this life and then you have the next life. And by the way, I had a big life like that. I wasn't writing for pornography, but I was like, had a record company, doing drugs, all that stuff. And then, I did have like a time where I, took a different turn. I actually am not embarrassed about what I did. I don't regret it. I am like, it made me who I am fully. And I also don't think we have to shame people for where they are and what they're doing. I'll just say that.
I completely agree.
Say that for
I
the record.
completely agree with that. And I think that, the Bible is full of examples of people who have questionable action early in life, and then something calls them to a higher mode of being.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So anyway, if we cannot get through this entire podcast without talking about ye gods. Okay, so I'm gonna force you to talk about it. But I really appreciate everything that you really did answer all these questions. Like how do you move through life with this epiphany? I think it's and by the way, like I know you're encapsulating this in a few words, and all of it takes work. All of it is experience. None of it is. Most of it is not glamorous or like, incredibly wonderful or gratifying. A lot of it is really hard. And so I totally appreciate that. But I do think it's wonderful. Quick question. Do you know Arianna Huffington?
Of course. Arianna Huffington, when I was writing my first I was working in television. I started writing a play, did 100 drafts over decades. And finally, it started being performed in 2014. It was the Geffen Playhouse here in Los Angeles. It's been all around the country and still keeps being performed. It's been in 27 cities, 4 countries.
What's
but anyway,
the name of the play? What's the name of the play?
The Gospel According to Thomas Jefferson, Charles Dickens, and Count Leo Tolstoy. And then there's a colon.
Oh, wow.
And the word then is discord, and people refer to the play as Discord.
Ooh,
but these 3 people all wrote their own version of the Gospels.
Yes,
and
they did.
I think that I am the first person in recorded history to realize that all 3 did this. And then I spent decades researching and writing to get them all in a liminal setting where each of the 3 thinks that his path to salvation depends on convincing the other 2 that their theology is incorrect.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So anyway, Arianna
had,
when she used to live in LA, she had this big mansion in Brentwood, and she did at Christmas time with a maybe, I don't know, it seemed like a 20-foot high Christmas tree. She had me do an early reading of this play, and one of the people who came to see it, there were a lot of, I remember Tim Robbins, R.J. Cutler, but one of them was Shirley MacLaine.
Oh,
and
wow.
afterwards, Shirley MacLaine came up to me and said, we need to have lunch. I need to tell you something. And I thought, this is why you get into show business, to be asked to lunch with Shirley MacLaine. And so a week or so later, I meet her at this very dark restaurant in Malibu. And we get to a table. She orders a bottle of wine, and she begins to tell me about how her friend Stephen Hawking is the reincarnation of Sir Isaac Newton, and I need to be adding Newton to my cast. And I said to her, it's taken me 25 years to get all three of these people researched to the point where I can accurately depict both their personalities, viewpoints, and their religion. And if I were to add Isaac Newton now, this play is never going to be finished if I keep adding people's. But I tremendously thank you for caring enough to wish to
I
make this
love it.
suggestion to me.
Yeah. Well, so Ariana, I approached Ariana about starting the religion section of the Huffington Post, which I did, and I did it for 7 years. We were the largest religion website in the country. Doing that with Ariana. But right when we started, she said, "You know what? You should go on Bill Maher. I know a guy." And I think she was talking about you. It never happened, but it was just like it triggered something in me. Like I was like, I think that this might be the guy. Anyway, okay, listen. I mean, we're coming to the end of the show, dude. And the whole idea was we were going to pitch Ye Gods to my audience. Audience listening, you're listening. Ye Gods is an amazing podcast. Talk to me. Okay. First of all, the list of people you have on this show is because you've been in Hollywood for so long. You have amazing people. Listen, what I like about it, you have the celebrities that are incredible, and everybody is like, oh my God, there's Martin Short. I mean, that must be incredible. You also have like people I've never heard of, frankly, but all of them have something that sparks in you a desire to talk to them. So why don't you talk about like, what do you hope for when you have someone come on Ye Gods? Like what is your like goal when you have a conversation, either with like someone who's like in the pantheon of celebrities in America or someone who fascinates you? I assume you approach them similarly.
Yes, I try to approach everybody in the same way. And what I say is what we're going to talk about, it could be religion, it could be faith, but what the underlying foundation here is I want to find out from you the rules by which you judge your own behavior and the behavior of other people to be appropriate or inappropriate. So, for example, you mentioned Martin Short, who was the first guest when we relaunched Ye Gods on the NPR network. He was raised Irish Catholic in Canada. When he was 12 years old, his 24-year-old oldest brother was killed in a car accident. He fell asleep at the wheel. And members of the church told 12-year-old Marty that God works in mysterious ways, which seemed an affront to him. He rebelled against it. And he also dismissed early in his career when he started to become famous, people would say, "Oh, you became a comic because you had so much tragedy early on." His brother died when he was 12. Both of his parents died before he was 20. And he said, and he maintains the opposite, that I grew up in such a loving, laughing, creative family that has allowed me to withstand tragedies in my life. But what's interesting in the podcast episode with him is he has, for over 40 years now, every Monday, he does the same thing, which is he goes through what he calls the 9 categories and evaluates how he's doing in them in his life. The first thing he does is he weighs himself. And for decades, he wanted to be 142 pounds. Now he's 75 and he gives himself to 148. So, but he goes through 9 categories. So, and this came up when he first got out of college, he was cast in the Toronto production of Godspell. And other people
famously, yeah,
of Godspell were the woman who became his girlfriend, Gilda Radner.
Yes.
Eugene Levy, Dave Thomas. Christ was played by Victor Garber. The musical director was Paul Schaefer.
It's
and
wild.
It ran for over 500 performances. So he thought early on, I'm going to have this blessed career in show business where I will always work. Well, when the show closed, he had trouble getting work. So that's how he developed this notion of the 9 categories. And every Monday, he goes through this. Now he does it on a computer. He used to do it in notebooks, but he evaluates. So, for instance, how's he doing with his family, the family that
Mm.
he has created? How's he doing with the family that he was born into? How's he doing with friends?
Mm.
How's he doing with health? Because he said, I realized what I was doing was putting too many eggs in the career basket.
Well,
And when I got depressed by after a year and a half of working and everybody loving everything I did and having a blast every night, 8 times a week, I was alone and I was auditioning and I wasn't getting the auditions. And I realized I was putting too many eggs in the career basket. And maybe what I should try and do is be a better friend. Maybe what I should try and do is be a better father or a better husband or a better, um, or he also talks about health. Maybe I should be eating better. Maybe I should be exercising more. I forget all the 9 categories. You can hear them if you listen to the episode. But this has become like in the same way that I meditate every day. He does this once a week, and it has grounded him and allowed him to withstand ups and downs in a long, long career, and also to be a wonderful. I would say there's not a better friend to have in this life than Martin Short.
yeah,
And
I mean,
just ask.
he certainly comes across that way. I mean, he's someone who I've never met, but certainly it's he has a magnetic personality. I always stop my scrolling when he's on my screen. I'm like, oh, I want to hear what he has to say. I think one of the things I love about you gods is that you really do have this wide cast. I mean, I remember when I was at Huffington Post, I would interview like Jimmy Carter one day and then RuPaul the next day. And everyone has something to say. And everyone is actually really seriously asking the question that you're asking of your people, which is like, how are you? What is the way you're approaching the world? And spiritual resources are not defined by necessarily religious categories, although that's a really important element of it. It's people are forging paths, and that's what you did. Before we get to the end of the show, we're living in a particular context, and so like none of our spirituality or none of these practices are done just for us personally or out of context. I mean, we have a context in America that is I think about a lot because of my work, which anyone listening to this show understands that I'm very concerned about the attack on kind of the pluralistic nature of our country. How does the questions that you're asking of these individuals around their private well-being and practice translate into how they interact with this cultural moment that we're in, we don't have to restrict it to that, but any cultural wider context of really difficult challenges happening, especially to marginalized communities, but really to our country, to our democracy. What are ways that you think about making that connection or inviting that thought, or maybe I'm putting too many words or too many ideas out there for you to.
No, I'm happy to answer this. Number one, I would say that these days when people if I talk to somebody calls me up and I haven't talked to them for a while, or I run into them on the street and they say, how are you? I always say I've got to answer in 2 ways. There's one way how I am with my career and my health and my family and my friends. And there's another way with the greater world that's outside of how I individually am. And depending on what day it is, that has greater or less impact on me and how I'm living my life. Number one. Number two, during World War II, Winston Churchill got on the radio and told the British people, these are not hard times. Now, this is a time when England was being bombed every night by the Nazis.
Mm.
And he said, these are not hard times. These are great times, the greatest our country has ever known. What I think is that no matter where you are on the political spectrum, no matter where you are in your life, no matter what your faith or lack of faith, we all share the same existential situation that we know that this life on earth is temporary, but when it ends, many of us have notions of what's going to happen, or maybe nothing will happen when we die, but nobody really knows for sure. There's a quote that I love from Thomas Jefferson where he says he stopped speculating on the afterlife and decided instead to rest his head on a pillow of ignorance, which God had made soft for him, knowing how often he should need to use it. And that's how I am. My belief in God has not wavered since 1987, but I have to think that a creator of a universe has resources beyond my imaginative ability to predict.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I focus on what is happening in this life. How am I to everyone? One of the things at Baylor, when I was addressing a group of students in this playwright panel, I said, every interaction in your life is sacred. And character is who you are to people who you do not think can help you. And so I try to live by that. So I think that, think about people who suffered the Holocaust. Think about people who suffered. Ken Burns, who's appeared on Ye Gods, he's going to be on for the second time to promote the American Revolution. But think about the challenges of people who would, for their entire lives, thought of themselves as English colonists, and then got behind the notion that, no, we're going to declare our independence. Think of how difficult that time period was, how difficult the Civil War, to invoke another Ken Burns project, how difficult that was, how difficult the civil rights struggle has been. But at every moment, if you believe in God, I think you have to believe that there is some referendum for how you think and how you are with everybody that you come in contact with, and that there is a higher jurisdiction that will be adjudicating what. One of the questions that I ask everybody at the end of each episode is, what do you think happens when you die? And do you think that there will be a referendum on how you have lived your life? And I'm intrigued by the panorama of answers that I get to that. But I think that one of the things I keep saying to myself is, why should life be easy? Why should this time on earth not be challenging every day? And what is happening every day is you're being challenged to live who you often say you are. You're getting challenged to prove that that is who you are.
Scott Carter is the creator, executive producer, and host of the Ye Gods with Scott Carter podcast, distributed by the NPR network. Scott, thank you so very much for taking this time for the State of Belief, and congratulations on this incredible new venture.
Thank you so much, Paul. It has been a delight. And thank you for the work that you've been doing, which I feel like is, I feel like yours and only a couple of other projects are antecedents to what I feel like I'm trying to do, or I feel like I have been, I feel it's like what I'm compelled to do.
Thank you so much. Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion? Please share The State of Belief with them, and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to continue growing The State of Belief, so please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandes Rauschenbusch on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.